Before the world knew the Dead Sea Scrolls, one copper artifact stood apart. The Copper Scroll, a text unlike parchment or leather, carved into metal as if the treasure it described had to outlive fire, water, and time itself. Imagine this: 91 tons of gold and silver, recorded not in whispers, but hammered into indestructible copper, sealed in the caves of Qumran. Why would anyone go to such extremes unless the stakes were beyond earthly wealth? Think about it. Why would the keepers of Israel's most sacred secrets choose copper, the eternal metal, when every other scroll chose fragile skin? Was it a map to the Second Temple treasure, or a myth meant to test faith? If this is true, the Valley of Achor, the Skaha stream, the hidden tunnels beneath Hyrcania fortress may still hold echoes of the temple gold. And if it is false, why does the geography match reality so perfectly? Ask yourself, what truth has been buried for 2,000 years, guarded by stone walls, skeletons, and silence? Could this be the testimony of Israel before the temple fell, a final record carved for generations yet unborn? Or could it be the world's greatest unsolved riddle, taunting treasure hunters, archaeologists, and believers alike? In this video, you will discover the entire journey, from the scroll's shocking discovery to the endless dead-end tunnel, to Herod's forgotten fortress, to the skeleton of an ibex that whispers of the first temple. You will see how modern technology, from thermal imaging to satellites, failed against the ancient code, and why perhaps the true treasure is not gold, but hope itself. So, let me ask you, what do you believe? Was the Copper Scroll a treasure map or a divine parable? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because your insight may unlock what centuries of scholars and hunters have missed. And if this mystery touches your heart, if it awakens wonder in you, then give a like, subscribe, and stay with this community. Because mysteries this great are never solved alone. They are revealed when we search together. The scroll discovered, a map or a myth. In 1952, deep within the desert caves of Qumran near the Dead Sea, an object unlike any other was pulled from the shadows. It was not fragile parchment. It was not delicate papyrus. It was copper, hammered and inscribed, a scroll that would not burn, rot, or fade. And on its surface, in stark, unyielding letters, were instructions to hidden treasures beyond imagination. 64 locations, gold, silver, sacred vessels, enough to rebuild kingdoms, enough to stir the hearts of generations. Imagine holding in your hands a list that claims to map out 91 tons of treasure once belonging to the Temple of Jerusalem. Is this myth or map? A parable of faith or a promise waiting to be claimed? Consider the details. The Valley of Achor, a place mentioned in the book of Joshua. The Skaha stream winding through the landscape. Hidden steps cut into stone, directions carved with the precision of someone who had been there. These are not places invented in folklore. They are real landscapes, still visible under the blazing desert sun. Scholars dismissed the Copper Scroll as allegory, saying no one would write literal treasure maps in Scripture. Yet the terrain matches. The rivers exist. The valleys stand exactly where the scroll describes. And so the question pierces deeper. Why record this on indestructible copper unless the treasures were real? Think of the desperation of a people watching their sacred temple threatened by destruction. Would they not hide their treasures to protect them? Would they not create a guide, preserved against time, for future generations to reclaim? And if you were the scribe tasked with preserving truth against the chaos of empires, would you not carve every word into metal so it could not be erased by flame or blade? But here lies the hypnotic power of the story. Perhaps the copper scroll is more than geography. Perhaps it is a mirror for our own souls. We chase gold, silver, relics of faith, believing fulfillment lies in the soil. Yet maybe the scroll is testing us, whispering that the true treasure is belief itself, faith hammered into permanence. When we read those 64 locations, we feel the pulse of mystery because the human heart longs for something hidden, something worth seeking. And in that longing, the scroll fulfills its purpose, igniting hope across centuries. Picture the desert wanderer, map in hand, standing at the mouth of the valley of Achor, searching stones for secret steps. Picture Robert Morgan, the American pilot who later spent a decade of his life hunting these very sites, spade in hand, sun burning overhead, each grain of sand promising a miracle. Failures piled up, yet the pursuit itself became the treasure because every step into the unknown is a testament of faith. And so we arrive at the first lesson. History is never only about stone or coin. History is layered with symbols, and truth often hides within metaphor. Just as parables cloak wisdom in story, the copper scroll cloaks faith in the language of geography. Those who seek only gold may end in despair. Those who seek meaning may find their souls enriched. This is not simply a scroll, it is a mirror, testing whether our eyes hunger for earth's metal or heaven's message. The dead-end tunnel, a chiseled riddle beneath the desert. If the scroll reads like a treasure map, then the tunnel beneath the desert is its cruelest riddle. For centuries, whispers spoke of a passage under the barren hills, a place where treasure might lie buried, sealed away since the days of the temple. Excavators brought modern drills and machines, believing they would carve open the gates of history. They chiseled 400 feet into unyielding rock. They labored for 500 days beneath the scorching Judean sun. And at the end of their sweat, their hopes, their endless investment, they found nothing but a wall. Here is the sting of reality. This is not Indiana Jones, where the hero swings across pits and discovers shining relics. This is the silence of dust, the cruel finality of stone. Imagine the crushing despair of the workers, staring at the wall, asking themselves if all the stories were lies. Was the copper scroll only an elaborate riddle meant to test faith? Or was the treasure moved long ago, leaving behind only ghosts and dust? Yet even here, the mystery deepens. Why would a tunnel be carved so long, so deliberate, if nothing lay at its end? Who spends years chiseling a passage into the earth for no reason? Was the wall a disguise, a sealed chamber beyond reach, hiding what eyes must not yet see? Or was it a statement carved in silence, that mankind cannot force open every door of heaven with drills and machines? In the Bible, walls are both barriers and symbols. Jericho fell when faith and trumpets brought its stones down. But here, the wall did not fall. It stood, unyielding, mocking human pride. The lesson is sharp. Sometimes the journey itself is the treasure. Sometimes the test of faith is to keep digging even when the world tells you to stop. Think of your own life. How many times have you chased a promise, worked for months or years, only to arrive at what seems like a dead end? How many times have you stood before the wall, your spirit crushed, ready to abandon hope? And yet, The dead end is not the end of your story. The tunnel of disappointment is often where the soul learns its deepest strength. This is the hypnotic pull of the copper scroll mystery. It is our story. Humanity chiseling into darkness, searching for light, hitting walls and questioning everything. The treasure hunters despaired, but we learn from their path. The wall forces us to ask, are we chasing gold, or are we chasing God's whisper in the stones? The smooth transition into the next revelation comes naturally. Above this tunnel, directly on the mountain ridge, stands Hyrcania Fortress, built by Herod himself. Was it coincidence or divine clue? If the tunnel below ends in silence, perhaps the fortress above holds the next chapter. The scroll beckons us upward, from the shadows beneath the earth to the strongholds of kings, where power and secrecy intertwine. And so the journey continues, not in despair, but in rising anticipation, because every wall is only a doorway disguised, waiting for the faithful to climb higher. Herod's Fortress. Above. Coincidence or divine clue? High above the desolate tunnel, rising against the relentless sun, stood Hyrcania Fortress. To the casual traveler, it was just another ruin scattered across Judea's wilderness, overshadowed by the legendary Masada. But to those who follow the copper scroll, Hyrcania is not just stone and silence. It is a clue, carved into the mountain by time and power. Built first by the Hasmoneans, seized and expanded by Herod the Great, later claimed by Byzantine monks, this fortress was layered with centuries of ambition. And its placement, directly over the hidden tunnel where treasure hunters dug in vain, makes the air tremble with questions. Was it coincidence that Herod, a king obsessed with control, chose this ridge to fortify? Or was it a deliberate act, covering and guarding secrets too dangerous to reveal? Imagine Herod surveying the landscape, his eyes calculating every valley and ridge. He knew the land, its caves, its stories. And if sacred vessels and temple wealth were hidden below, then building a fortress above was more than defense. It was domination over the sacred. Herod was not just building walls, he was casting a shadow over Israel's faith, declaring that even treasures of God would bend beneath his throne. And yet, centuries later, the fortress itself lies broken, its stones crumbling into dust, while the mystery beneath it still whispers. The treasure may be gone, but the question burns brighter. Why here? Why above this tunnel? Why this mountain? The lesson presses into our hearts. We are often tempted to overlook the forgotten places. Masada receives tourists, fame, documentaries, while Hyrcania sits almost abandoned, mentioned only in footnotes. Yet here is where the real mystery lingers. Just as God chose Bethlehem over Rome, Nazareth over palaces, truth hides in places the world dismisses. The fortress above the tunnel is a reminder that answers are rarely where everyone is looking. When you ignore the noise and walk into the overlooked places of your life, you may find the greatest treasures waiting. Picture standing inside Hyrcania's broken walls at dusk, the desert wind howling like ancient voices. You see the valley spread below, the same valley the copper scroll described. You feel history pressing against your chest, whispering, "This is not coincidence. This is a clue." And in that moment, the desert becomes alive, not with gold, but with revelation. The skeleton and the ibex, a message from the first temple. In 2002, archaeologists crawling through a chamber near the fortress unearthed something no treasure hunter expected: the skeletal remains of an ibex, perfectly preserved, untouched for over 2,000 years. Beside it, fragments of human bone. Tests revealed a date, around 590 BC, just years before the first temple was destroyed in 586 BC. Suddenly, the Copper Scrolls mystery stretched further back, linking not only to the Second Temple, but to the very fall of the First. What was an ibex doing sealed within a desert chamber? Was it a ritual sacrifice, a sacred offering meant to guard a hiding place? Was it a symbol, a frozen message from priests fleeing the Babylonian destruction, trying to preserve not only treasure, but memory itself? The ibex was a creature of the wilderness, often associated with strength and survival on impossible cliffs. To find it buried here is more than accident. It feels like a parable, a reminder that faith itself was hidden, preserved in the wilderness when the heart of Israel was torn down. Think of the timing. As Jerusalem burned, as Babylon's armies dragged exiles away, someone sealed this chamber with care. They left behind not gold, but symbols of faith, a frozen testimony that even in destruction God's people remembered. This skeleton was not wealth, but witness. And in its silent bones we hear a cry across centuries: hope does not die when walls fall. Hope hides, survives, and waits to be rediscovered. For modern seekers, this discovery is electrifying. It tells us the tunnel and fortress may be older than we thought, possibly connected to both temples, layered with generations of secrets. It tells us that treasure is not always what we expect. Hunters wanted gold. They found bones. But bones speak louder than coins, because they remind us that humans were here, grieving, surviving, believing. The ibex becomes a voice across time, telling us that when empires erase, faith writes itself in hidden chambers. And here is the healing truth. Our lives, too, carry layers of history. Beneath our ruins lie testimonies we thought forgotten. Beneath our walls lie offerings we once made, prayers whispered in the dark. The skeleton of the ibex is not just archaeology, it is reflection. What have you buried deep in your own wilderness that still waits to be uncovered? What offering have you sealed away, forgotten by the world but remembered by God? From Hyrcania's fortress to the bones beneath it, the story keeps building. Each layer reveals not certainty, but deeper mystery. And yet, that is the beauty of the Copper Scroll saga. It teaches us that pursuit matters, that meaning lies in overlooked places, that history is alive not only in gold, but in symbols, not only in power, but in whispers. The fortress pointed us to humility, the skeleton pointed us to hope, and the journey leads us further, to the hearts of the treasure hunters themselves, men and women who gave years of their lives chasing this dream, their failures, their faith, their obsession. These too are part of the testimony, and so the path carries us forward, from ancient chambers to modern seekers, because the story is not finished, and neither are we. The treasure hunters: faith, obsession, and failure. Among the endless sands and jagged cliffs of the Judean desert, men risked everything to chase the promise of the Copper Scroll. One of them was Robert Feather Morgan, a former American pilot who abandoned the comfort of ordinary life to dig alone for over 10 years. Imagine him under the scorching sun, blistered hands gripping rusted tools, his face cracked by both heat and hope. While the world moved on, he tunneled deeper, convinced that beneath the desert lay the gold and silver vessels once carried from the temple. His was not just a quest for treasure, it was a pilgrimage of obsession, where each strike of the shovel echoed with faith. He died without finding a single coin, but his story became part of the treasure itself. Others followed. Archaeologists with advanced equipment, teams funded by universities and governments, soldiers of science determined to prove the scroll was myth or map. Yet one by one, they failed. The tunnel mocked them, the desert devoured their hopes, and the fortress above remained silent. In the shadow of each failure, though, grew a strange beauty, the resilience of the human spirit. Just like seekers of the Ark of the Covenant or explorers diving into the oceans searching for Atlantis, they embodied something greater than discovery. They embodied longing. Here is where the hypnotic truth comes alive. Treasure hunters often believe they are chasing metal, but in reality, they are chasing meaning. The copper scroll pulled them like gravity, not because of gold, but because it whispered of connection to the divine. When your soul believes something sacred is hidden, you cannot rest until you've pursued it. And so these hunters remind us of ourselves. Each of us digs in the desert of our lives, searching for hope, searching for answers. Sometimes we strike emptiness, sometimes we bleed, sometimes we collapse in despair. Yet every shovel of dirt lifted is a testimony of faith. The healing lesson is this: obsession can destroy, but faith can transform obsession into endurance. Gold fades, vessels tarnish, but the act of seeking itself purifies the soul. The copper scroll continues to call because it knows that humanity will not stop searching. Its treasure is not only the wealth of Israel's temple, but the courage of men and women willing to give everything for what they believe is true. Think of your own journey. What treasure are you chasing? And is the prize gold or the person you are becoming along the way? Let your reflection breathe here. And if you feel the weight of this mystery, share your thoughts in the comments, because every seeker's voice is part of the greater story. Modern technology versus ancient mystery. As centuries turned and tools evolved, modern minds believed the copper scroll would finally surrender its secrets. Thermal imaging scanned the desert ridges, drones hovered above the ruins of Hyrcania, ground-penetrating radar crawled over the valley of Achor. The results: pigeons nesting in cracks, shadows mistaken for chambers, silence where gold was promised. Technology declared what faith had always whispered: not every mystery bends to machines. This is where the paradox shines. We live in an age where satellites read license plates from orbit, where algorithms predict our desires, where supercomputers simulate the stars. Yet here, in the barren land of Qumran, an ancient scroll carved on copper defies our tools. It is as if God himself hid this riddle beyond the reach of human pride, reminding us of Babel's tower. Men believed they could climb to heaven, but heaven reminded them of their limits. The hypnotic energy of this truth is undeniable. The copper scroll mocks our arrogance, teaching that some mysteries cannot be solved by force, code, or scan. They must be lived, endured, contemplated. Technology sought gold, but the scroll offers something different: humility. It reminds us that even the greatest machines cannot measure faith, cannot scan for hope, cannot excavate truth carved in spirit. Think of the irony. Billions spent on satellites and radars, yet the scroll sits quietly, still undefeated, still whispering across the ages. Does that not stir your heart? That something older than empires, carved on copper, still holds power in an age of steel and silicon? And maybe, just maybe, that is the treasure itself. That in a world where everything seems explainable, there are still places where mystery reigns. Here lies the lesson. Technology extends our reach, but it does not extend our wisdom. The treasure may never be coins or vessels. The treasure may be the reminder that humanity still hungers, still kneels before the unknown. And when we kneel before mystery, we find healing, because we admit we are not gods, but seekers. That is why the copper scroll endures. It keeps us searching, keeps us humble, keeps us alive to wonder. And now, from treasure hunters who gave everything to technology that failed, the story turns again. For the final reflection waits, a question burning brighter than gold. What if the real treasure was never metal at all? What if it was the testimony of hope itself, carved in copper so we would never forget? That is where this journey leads us next. The copper scroll whispers across centuries, not with the clinking of coins, but with the thunder of mystery. A scroll unlike any other Dead Sea Scrolls, carved on copper so that no fire could burn it, no water could wash it away, and no empire could silence it. It promised gold, silver, sacred vessels of the Second Temple, hidden tunnels beneath Hyrcania Fortress, valleys carved with secret steps, treasures measured in tons. And yet what we found instead were walls, silence, skeletons, and the stubborn refusal of truth to be captured by machines. That silence itself is powerful, because in the absence of gold, we were forced to ask what the real treasure was. Was it the silver? Was it the vessels? Or was it the testimony of a people carving hope into metal when their world was collapsing? When you think about it, the copper scroll is not so different from your own story. Each of us has hidden places within us, caves where we buried prayers, tunnels where we sealed memories, walls where we slammed into despair. We keep digging, we chase after the treasure of success, love, recognition, answers. Sometimes all we hit is stone. But stone teaches. Stone whispers that even if you don't find the coins, you find yourself. The treasure hunters who gave decades of their lives remind us of our own obsessions, our own faith. Robert Morgan, alone in the desert for 10 years, never finding gold yet leaving behind the story of endurance, is not so different from you when you keep going even when life looks empty. Technology tried to break the mystery. Drones, thermal scans, satellites scanning the valley of Achor, all returned empty. The treasure mocked the machines. And maybe that was the point, that no algorithm can measure faith, no radar can read hope, no satellite can map the human soul. The copper scroll resists because it is not meant to be solved by science alone. It is meant to ignite longing. And longing is the most powerful treasure of all. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing in Qumran where it was found. The desert wind whips through the caves. The copper gleams faintly in your hand, heavy, eternal, whispering of Israel's lost glory, of the first temple's destruction, of faith buried but not destroyed. Above you rises Hyrcania Fortress, Herod's walls now broken, and below you lies the tunnel where men struck nothing but silence. And yet, standing there, you realize you are holding something richer than gold. You are holding a story that refuses to die. The lesson is piercing. The Copper Scroll's true treasure was never piles of coins. Its treasure was memory, faith, the unbroken chain of people who refused to let hope vanish even when the temple fell, even when empires rose and crumbled. That is why it was carved into copper, because truth needed to outlive time, and that truth now belongs to you. The treasure is not waiting in the desert. It is waiting in your heart every time you choose to believe, every time you choose to keep digging, even when the world shows you only walls. So what do you think? Was the Copper Scroll a literal treasure map, or was it a parable, a message left for us to uncover only when we were ready? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because your perspective might be the missing piece that generations of hunters and scholars overlooked. This conversation is itself a community of seekers, and the truth is too big for one person to carry alone. If you feel this story lit something inside you, if the mystery of the Copper Scroll stirred your spirit or helped you see your own life with fresh eyes, then I invite you to share a little energy back. A like, a subscribe, a word in the comments. It may seem small, but it fuels the journey forward. If this video gave you light on a dark day, or reminded you that hope is never buried too deep, your support means more than gold, more than silver, more than any treasure the scroll could hold. Every gesture, no matter how small, is priceless. Thank you with all my heart for walking through this desert mystery with me. The Copper Scroll may never give up its gold, but it has already given us something far more valuable: wonder, hope, and the reminder that the greatest treasure is not hidden in the earth but alive in us. And as long as we keep searching together, the story will never end.